o'clock. I declare the meeting open and welcome you all to this December meeting of the West Glamorgan Archives Committee. Very nice to see you all. The first item is apologies for absence, please, Gareth.
Only from Sarah Perrons at the moment, Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much. Perhaps others might join us in due course, but thank you very much. Second item, are there any disclosures of personal or prejudicial interests? No? Good. Silence means no, which is excellent. Thank you very much. Third item are the minutes of the last meeting, which were held on the 11th of September. So first of all, minutes for accuracy. Page 1. Anything there? Page 2. Page 3. Page 4. So take it that the minutes are all accurate. So please, can you agree to the accuracy of the minutes, please, for the minutes themselves? Everybody okay? Thank you very much. And I suppose I sign them in due course, do I, Gareth, at an appropriate time when we actually can do it physically?
Indeed.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. The next item is the report of the County Archivist. Kim, over to you, please.
Thanks, Chair. I hope everybody can hear me all right. Do safe and don't. I've got the headphones on. I'm afraid it's a very thin report this quarter because obviously because of the restricted activity, but it does repeat very much of the content of the previous meeting. So if there are any matters arising from the previous meeting, I'm sure they'll be covered in my report this time, because essentially it's the same sections. Obviously the overriding issue is the continuing pandemic, and during the last quarter we have reopened. As you'll see from my camera, I'm in the office today, and in fact I'm on desk this afternoon, so my colleague has very kindly agreed to step in this morning to otherwise I would be in the search room giving the report now. But we have been assessed as providing a COVID secure service in Swansea, I hasten to add, and we are providing a limited service by prior appointment to people who know what they want to look at. So essentially they have to make a booking, order documents from the catalogue, and also they can only see the documents that they order in advance. They can't change their mind on the day or whatever. So the numbers are fairly limited. However, it's something of a releasing the cork thing that there are a number of people who during the lockdown had various issues that they wanted to view the archives in order either to do some research or else to verify things from the archives. I'm pleased to say that Councillor Wingrave from the East Talbot was in the archives 2 weeks ago, I think it was, looking at Coed Frank Community Council minutes, if I'm not mistaken. I was on desk that day. It does show that there is, well, it sort of points out that there are legal reasons why people use archives beyond the pure pleasure of researching history that is a popular activity. I'll give another example. This time from Swansea, when I was on desk, there was a lady in who has had a footpath collapse at the back of her house. She's in Cardiff, and she wanted to go through documents to see whether it was, this time, Swansea Council's responsibility, or whether it was her responsibility for the footpath to be repaired, because it was a sad case in that she'd not, because the footpath had collapsed into her house, she hadn't been able to live in her house since January, and it was obviously having a serious effect on her, and she was in dispute with the council about who was going to repair the footpath so that she could repair her property. So those are the kind of reasons that people use archives beyond the pure pleasure of, for example, sorry, that was the call coming in. Sorry about that. So it's important that we bear that in mind, and that actually relates to the future of the archives as well. Actually, that we provide a service for local people which is over and above the pure recreational activity that many associate with archive using. So we can answer questions like boundary, or help with boundary disputes, with issues like this, with all sorts of other things that and use the archives for, which is one of the reasons, and we obviously will get onto this later in the meeting, one of the reasons I'm really keen that we maintain public access to the archives. If we were to say, when the Civic Centre closes, that they can all go into commercial storage somewhere, there are a whole host of reasons why people use archives, where they need to check facts, and it helps with in the cases that we've been mentioning, with claims about who's responsible for certain things and so on. So it's really important activity, and this is one of the things that's discussions that's currently going on behind the scenes, is whether the Common Land Register should be transferred to archives, as they're moving over to an electronic system. But the paper copies of the Common Land Register, it's being decided by Welsh Government that they should go to local archives. Those are the kind of things that really provide a key service to citizens. I mean, sometimes they are in dispute with the council, but we have to make sure that people have their rights to view the documents, to check that in the case of the footpath, it may be that the documents point to the fact that the council is liable, but that's actually part of what we do. We're not here to to act as a point of defence for the council. We're here to provide those rights to citizens to be able to see documents that help them in their case. And over the last few years, we've had all sorts of people, those kinds of reasons, whether it's caravans on Gower, or some planning dispute, or we've had drainage issues in East Talbot, where people have wanted to develop land, but they've got issues around drainage. So there's all sorts of reasons. So I'm really pleased that we have provided this service, which has been very much praised by people who've used it. It is limited. We can only have 4 people in at one time, but we've not actually, in most days, we're open the 4 days a week, and most days we don't have 4 people. So I think we're meeting the demand, and that's partly because you have to know what you want to look at before you come in to use the archives. And if people aren't quite sure what what they want to look at, we're trying to deal with those by email rather than by well, certainly it's not possible for people to come in and just asks the sort of general questions that would have happened with the full service, where people come in and aren't quite sure what documents they need to see, and they generally have a vague question like, I'd like to research my family history, or I'd like to research the history of my house, or whatever. So that's section 1. I'll stop to take any questions or any comments from members if they wish to discuss that.
Could I just come in, Kim, just to endorse really what you're saying, because from the point of view of the university and our students, it's been absolutely invaluable to have the service reopened. We've got people working on PhD, masters and undergraduate dissertation theses, and to be able to say to them that they can go and there's a pre-booking service available has been really, really important. So the fact that you've done all this work to provide this COVID secure service, I think has really benefited them and has helped support, the ongoing historical research going on in university. So just to say thank you for all your efforts on that front.
Thank you. Thanks, Louise. I think it's also, I have to say, I think it's been psychologically very good for the staff to come back together. We've had months without seeing each other. We're in 2 teams, so Andrew and I haven't actually seen each other face to face since March, I don't think, because Andrew heads Team A and I head Team B. So that's in case one team has to self-isolate. So we'll be able to maintain the service because the other expand the number of days they come into the office to cover the other team. But touch wood, I'm pleased to say that so far neither of us, our teams, have had to self-isolate yet. So we've managed to. So we come in 2 days a week. So I come in on Thursdays and Fridays. Andrew is responsible for the service on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, and we have an archivist on desk and somebody on reception. It's also been very useful with the new reader's ticket system, which I've talked about in previous meetings, the archives card, which is a card that allows you to access virtually every archive in Wales, and also a number of archives across England, that it allows us to keep the test, trace and protect register that we're required to do. So what the personal data that we're able to see of our visitors, because they scan their card when they come in, is their name and a contact telephone number. So we would be able to contact them if there was a case associated with a visit to the archives, somebody tested positive, and we were traced. So we'd be able to trace everybody who was there on that morning or afternoon session. So we have 2 sessions, morning and afternoon. Sometimes people stay the whole day, but in the most instances they're just coming for a half-day session. And we also try to slightly stagger the arrival time so we don't have a queue at reception as well. So if there are no other further, I can't see any hands raised. If nobody wants to make any comment on that,
well, just to say,
sorry,
before you move on, Kim, I'm sure everyone on the committee is so pleased that you have been able to open and it's been going well, and not just the fact that you have been able to continue with the service, albeit it is a limited service, nevertheless it is vital and valuable, and good that everybody, you've got the 2 teams, and it's good, one, not just for keeping the service open, but of course that means that everybody is kept safe and well in your 2 teams as well, which we're also pleased to hear about. But thank you for all your efforts, for what you've done to enable this service to open, albeit in its limited capacity. So thank you, Kim.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Chair. I just mentioned Neath. Well, there's no particular there's been no particular pressure to reopen these, but it would be very difficult to have a socially distanced service in the Neath Mechanics Institute. I don't actually see that it could be possible, and of course a number of the volunteers from the Neath Antiquarian Society are quite elderly, and so have been very careful in going out and so on. So I think probably until we're able to resume a normal service, we'll probably be looking at the Neath Mechanics Institute remaining closed, and hopefully sometime next year we'll be able to reopen with the service as it was before the pandemic. I'll move on to outreach and education activity. We've continued that. That's been part of the means of keeping in touch with our user base and with people who don't necessarily use the archives, but are just interested in history and so on. So we've done a number of outreach activities and tweets and Facebook posts and so on. Probably ask Andrew to say a few words on that in a second, but just mention that every year archives across the UK run a campaign which lasts a week, which is called Explore Your Archive, and we took part in it with social media this year. So it's a series of themed posts on social media relating to particular aspects of using archives, whether it's archives and maps or archives and buildings and so on. So it's always useful to take part in that. I have to say I don't do social media myself, so I think possibly I'd let Andrew say a few words if you want to add anything, because it's not really my forte. Over to you, Andrew, if you want to.
Andrew, you need to unmute your mic.
Yeah, I've just done it now. Thank you. Sorry. Yeah. Yes. Just to say, yes, there's the archives awareness campaign that takes place, Explore Your Archives campaign rather, which takes place. So we took part in that in the usual way. We haven't done as much social media as we did during lockdown, partly because the new way of working is time consuming for all of us. It takes a lot of time, particularly in terms of dealing with email correspondence, to make sure that when people do come in, that they have exactly what they need. So a lot of work is done in advance, which would normally be done in the search room if we were open normally. So we've done just to keep the momentum going from what we did before, and we'll continue to do this as time goes by. And they've been reasonably successful. Not quite the huge numbers that we had watching them during lockdown, but reasonably good. We feel that the Explore campaign went pretty well. There's I haven't got the exact figures, but the engagement during the week went into tens of thousands. So it was positive stuff, and important to keep the message that we're still there, we're still doing our thing. I'm trying to make sure that all staff, if they come across, for example, an interesting document or working on an interesting query, that to encourage them to put those sort of things out on social media. We've got plans for a few things for later on. One of the things I was asked to do at the last meeting was to post a few messages about the Enniskillen estate collection that we took in. Now I haven't done that yet, but what I've been planning is a brief campaign, probably to take place in January once Christmas is out of the way. But basically, I want to tag it to the catalogue, because that's now available online, and it's it would be a shame just to say, look, here's a wonderful thing, but you can't look at it yet. So it's going to be to say, here is a thing, and you can find out more here, and so on. There's some wonderful stuff in that in that collection, so it's well worth doing properly.
Now I'm on mute now. Thanks, Andrew.
And any questions of Kim on this item?
Or indeed of Andrew?
Andrew, yes, yes, Andrew, perhaps rather than you, Kim, as it's social media. Lyndon.
Great, fine, thanks. Yeah, no, well done to Andrew, really, because I've been retweeting and sharing the things on Facebook, and they've gone down really well with people, and there's been quite a bit of interest. So, you know, well done, and keep that up. Really, it's really excellent.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I think one of the things I would just add is that because we're now back in the building and stuff, and now back in the building, and this is kind of going on to where the section of the report, so we won't go there quite yet, but it's really important to re-engage with the collections in terms of listing, boxing, barcoding and other things. So there's a whole lot of work now that we're back in the building at least part of the week, and that has an impact on the amount of social media that we post, really, because we've got to get back to our sort of core activity. But I think the fact that we posted so much during lockdown was essentially linked to the fact that we were completely closed, so you couldn't visit the archives, and you could satisfy some of your interest in local history that way. So yeah, it's quite natural that it'll be on a gentle downward incline back to where we were beforehand.
Yeah, and just thank you, Kim, and just to also what Lyndon said, I quite agree. The Twitter nuggets of information, Andrew, they have been so interesting. I've recently gone on to Twitter myself, being very resistant to use social media, but I absolutely love Twitter, and it just has been so interesting. And I can only praise you. Very cleverly done, just giving that brief say nugget of information which really takes your imagination. Particularly liked the map feature, very clever, something very simple but very clever and imaginative, and it was really lovely to see. And the photographs again were lovely, and of course the Neath Abbey Ironworks collection, which is one of the best collections in the country, I believe, Kim, isn't it? And how proud we are to have such a collection in our archives. So thank you, Andrew, for everything that you're doing.
Well, thank you very much. It's good. It's been useful to do, interesting to do, and I'm glad you're all enjoying it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Back to you, Kim.
We'll move on into use of the service. So we've had 120 users over the last quarter, which is less than a tenth of this time last year. I think we just have to, the end of the year figures, we have to be aware they're going to be absolutely tiny compared to previous years. So we won't have the discussions about why the number's so low. We just have to recognise it's probably going to be in the hundreds. And one thing I will say is that not all archives across Wales are open yet. So we weren't the first to reopen, but Glamorgan Archives in Cardiff is still closed. Gwent Archives is closed. Carmarthenshire, obviously, it's been refurbished, and it's so it has been closed for a number of years now, but it hasn't reopened yet. So Pembrokeshire is still closed. Yes, the staff are working, being seconded. So essentially, we're probably on the far South Wales. We're probably the only, I think that's right in saying, we're the only archive that's open. Ceredigion's closed, Powys is open, and then when you get up to North Wales, there are more archives that are open. So Powys opened back in June, July. Anglesy's open, but there's very limited archive open. The Richard Burton Archives in Swansea University hasn't reopened yet, so it's good that we're able to provide that service. I've just turned the wrong page there, so I think the next thing we move on to is the teaching resources relating to Wales's connection with the slave trade. So I'll move on to that. Ready. So this is being progressed in particular by one of our archivists who has a particular interest in this subject. The modules as developed are intended to cover 3 aspects of Wales's diverse communities, and as listed in the report there. So the first module relates to Wales's part in the slave trade and its part in the abolition movement, and that is the module that is nearest to being finished, although it's a fair way off yet, because I think these things do take time. It's actually with Professor Charlotte Williams, by a quirk of coincidence, really. You may or may not know that Professor Charlotte Williams is of Bangor University, and she is chairing a working group on the rebalancing of the Wales history curriculum. I submitted this first module to Race Council Cymru for comment and received a reply to say that they found it very interesting and they were forwarding it to Charlotte Williams for consideration. I wasn't expecting that to happen. It just so happens that Uzo Uwobi, who is the one of the key Council Cymru personal friend of Charlotte Williams, and forwarded it on. So I just got a message to say I forwarded it to Charlotte, or my friend Charlotte. So I don't know how far. I think it needs a fair bit of work yet, but the Glamorgan archives in particular were very keen that it should be submitted to Race Council Cymru before it goes to teachers for consideration. So it's really important that the tone of the teaching resources, that it also speaks to Wales's diverse communities as well. So, I endorse that. I have to say it was Glamorgan Archives who were saying it's got to go to Race Council Cymru before we even send it to any teachers for consideration. I'm quite happy with that, and that's the process that we'll follow with the other modules as well when they're finished, in inverted commas, or when the draft is finished. Which one takes the story from the abolition of slavery in British Empire to onwards up to the 1920s, which looks at the growth of minority ethnic communities in the South Wales ports, taking the story of the recruitment of many people, particularly from round sort of the Aden area, so that's Yemen and some modern day Yemen and modern day Somalia, who were recruited into the merchant marine and settled in the South Wales ports, and in particular, and this is the great advantage of working with Glamorgan Archives, there is in Cardiff, which became, in parts quite a diverse town, yes, town, and then city. Trying to think of the date, 1905, I think it is. So yeah, it's that's a part of an interesting history, and of course, one of the things we can't overlook is the race riots in Cardiff and Newport. So also looking at those, the history of those, the causes, and so on. So I was really pleased when Gwent Archives expressed an interest in joining there, because there were race riots in Cardiff, Newport. I can't remember whether there's anywhere. Louise, I'm kind of looking at you on screen, whether you're going to correct me on this, knowing that you're a historian yourself, but I'm just trying to anyway, certainly race riots in Cardiff and Newport, and I think one other place, Barry, I think it's Barry, is the other place, thankfully not in Swansea. So that the excellent. Thanks, Louise. So that's obviously got going to have a lot of input from Glamorgan Archives. And another thing that Glamorgan Archives can add to that, because they have the archives of the Bute Town History Centre, which is part of the Bute Town Arts Centre, which sadly had to close. I think I'm correct to say certainly the archive was transferred to Glamorgan Archives anyway, and that contains large photographic collection of Cardiff's late 19th, early 20th century diversity, particularly, there are plenty of pictures of the Bute Town area and so on. So that's certain key messages. I think if Swansea, if we'd just said we're going to put this resource on our website on our own, I don't think it would be something that we could really send to the rest of Wales and say this is something that we can use to help the curriculum, and to some extent we might get submerged in the end result. But I think it's a little bit like with the archives card, which I always think started in Swansea with me putting forward this idea at our conference of archivists in Manchester a couple of years back. I think you'd have to be on the committee, have been on the committee for a number of years to know that. I'm quite happy that it's actually become a national, that's a UK national scheme. I think the fact is that its reach is much greater if it becomes something that's taken on by other bodies, and the same with the teaching resources. I mean, the aim is that every child in Wales should have a full picture of Wales's part in this complex history, and if it ends up that the majority of the resources are contributed by Cardiff, that's well and good, because Cardiff has a lot to offer to the teaching resources. So I think we can rest assured that the idea started with us, and it may be that Swansea's, there'll be a part, obviously have a part in that, but it may be that we're alongside things contributed by Newport, by Bangor, by Cardiff. So it may just be that we it's an all Wales thing, but at least we can know that it started here, and David Morris's part in creating it, I think, will be acknowledged as his authorship, but he's done that simply through his own passion for the subject. So that's more than I could have asked him to do. It's simply that he's got a passion for this. And we have, if you've been on the committee for a number of years, you'll know that we took part in the celebrating celebrating our diverse heritage. The day some years back on March the 1st, we created an exhibition for that, and we've done various things. And David, prior to working for West Glamorgan Archives, was involved in the exhibition at the National Museum, the National Waterfront Museum, called Everywhere in Chains, which was Wales's connection to the slave trade. So I hope that his authorship of much of the resources will be acknowledged at some point, but it's going to be a collaborative activity at the end, and it should hopefully give a pan-Wales picture, in which obviously West Glamorgan played a part, but there are also other parts of Wales that were very involved in all aspects of this, in particularly the Penrhyn estate up in North Wales was probably the estate that was most connected to the slave trade and slavery plantations. It's not particularly a history that they have to be proud of, but the archive collections for the Penrhyn estate, which are in Bangor University Archives, are some of the finest resources in Wales for the study of Wales's connection to slavery and the slave trade. So I'm really pleased that Bangor University has come in on the project. I'll stop there and I'll take any questions if anybody would like to make any comments or questions.
Yeah, Louise, you've got your hand up.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, I just wanted to thank him and the service really for all the work that I know that they have been doing on this and wider issues, and I'm very proud that it is our archives that are taking the lead, which is fantastic. And just to agree, I think it's absolutely right that we do consult with Race Council Cymru, and obviously they've got spin-off projects like Black History Month, Black History 365 and Black Curriculum and things like that. So they're obviously very well placed to, and they've got academics involved and things to say, if the treatment is correct and it's done sensitively. So that's I would agree with that approach. And just a question is, will the resources, when they're completed, will they be online for anyone to access, or is it just envisaged as teachers? Because I'm sure that the general public would like to have a look at some of these resources as well, who didn't get the chance to learn them when they were in school. It would be nice if it could be a public resource, if that's possible.
It's a very good question, Louise. I think the plan is to put everything on Hub, which you'll be aware of is accessed by pupils and teachers. So unless I'm mistaken, people who know better, but my understanding is that Hub is accessed by all teachers and all pupils in Wales have a login. And
governors and parents have a login through their pupils, their children as well. And
I don't know with the wider public. I think we'll have to see how it goes, how it develops. One of the things we haven't done is apply for any funding from MAL, from Welsh Government, although obviously this is something that's very close to Welsh Government's heart. I think I'm wary of applying too soon for funding until we know where external funding might be helpful, and it may be in using an educational consultant, or it may be in trialing it, but at the moment we're motoring along without external assistance, but I think I'll have to work with Welsh Government to do that. But it may be as new partners have come in on the project that we think of new aims. So if it might be some form of exhibition, say, or something like that, whether touring exhibition, then it may be that funds may be appropriate for that or whatever. But we'll see how it develops. But I think it's really important to always take very careful and measured steps, and because I'm aware that if the tone of any resource were wrong, it could cause offence. So I think it's really important to actually consult with Race Council Cymru to make sure that we're sensitive to the it's a sensitive area to be working in, and so we need to make sure that we don't cause any offence in any way.
Thank you. Ridian, have you got your hand up, or is it just?
You're on mute, sir.
Sorry, if it was that, but it was by accident. Sorry.
Oh, right. That's okay. Well, thank you for that, Kim. It sounds it is a really exciting project. I'm sure we all look forward to seeing it when it's complete. And quite clearly, there is lots of potential, isn't there, for wider use of this. And but you're absolutely right. It is taking it one step at a time, really, to see how it develops, because one can see that actually it could become really quite a large project, but such an important one as well. But it's really good to hear that the work is progressing, and that we are actually at the forefront in this project, and the collaboration with others sounds as though it's certainly adding greater value to it than what it would have been if we just confined it to this area, because I think it's so important to look at these things in the whole context of a country, of a nation, rather than just our immediate locality. So yes, very exciting work to come, and look forward to seeing that. Thank you.
Thanks very much. So I move on to, I realised that I didn't number the paragraph, Archives Accreditation, paragraph 5. Obviously, one of the key things, there isn't a huge amount to say about any prospect for new buildings at the moment, but the accreditation process, the accreditation panel took place on the 4th of November, where, as you might remember from the last meeting, we had to provide a response to the Archives Accreditation panel to the several issues which were to be addressed by the service. The primary one of which is the plan for the removal of the archives from Swansea Civic Centre, and what the short or medium term plan and the long term plan was for the archives. So I responded to the accreditation panel appropriately with what we know, which is that the proposed closure date for Swansea Civic Centre, it's actually moved forward to September 2023. That's what's been in most recent things, as opposed to December 2023, although the report is still to go, isn't it, Gareth? Yes. The short-term plan is that the archive collections would be split between Glamorgan Archives in Cardiff and the Richard Burton Archives in Swansea, both institutions having said that they were willing to take parts of the collections. The work that we have to do now is to actually work out what the split of the collections would be. As I've said previously in previous meetings, that neither institution is capable of taking the whole of our collections, which is understandable because what they're essentially using is their expansion space on a commercial basis. So both archives, refurbished about 10 years ago or more. Both of them were built with expansion space for several decades, and so they have this space, and they also, like every public institution, have a need for income. So renting their space out commercially, which is archival quality space, we're obviously very well situated to be a customer of them. The main part of the collection I would anticipate would go to Cardiff, and that is because Cardiff is recognised as a repository for public records. So those are the records of UK government which are deposited here. The primary collection of public records is magistrates' courts, so it's all the court records, but there are also NHS records, all the records of the nationalised industries, coroners' records, and so on. So those are we hold those by designation as a local place of deposit from UK government, and that's administered through the National Archives in Kew, which gives the National Archives actually one of the reasons that they are involved in this is because part of our collections are essentially their records of central government. So the National Archives has to is a stakeholder in our discussions. Also, the parish records, they are only we're only able to hold them as a designated place of deposit there. So it's pretty important that we the parish records and the public records go to Cardiff. And one of the pieces of work that we've got to do is work out how much of the collection we can transfer to Cardiff, and then what's the most appropriate part of the collection which would go to the Richard Burton Archives. So I laid that out before the panel. The Swansea Cabinet member and Tracy McNulty also provided a letter of support to the application to the panel, which indicated that this is a priority of Swansea Council to find a solution, long-term solution for the archives, and they are considering a number of possibilities. Obviously, that's not been firmed up yet, but the essential part of the letter of support was that the Swansea Council is aware of this. It's on the risk register associated with the vacation of the Civic Centre. Anyway, along with other measures which were taken to meet the requirements of the panel considered all those, and they decided that we should continue in with a provisional status for another 12 months. So we've not gone back to full accreditation. We're another year of provisional accreditation, and that means that we have to report back on developments in this within a maximum of 12 months, although we can report back earlier if we feel that we've got our case ready to present to the accreditation panel. As I say, I think in the report, the accreditation panel isn't just Welsh Government, but it's all those bodies that are listed in the report there. So it's not kind of it's a multi various committee consisting of representatives from, primarily from outside Wales. Actually, when you think about it, the Welsh Government is represented on it, but it's also representatives from Scotland, England, and presumably from Northern Ireland, because it says Public Records Office of Northern Ireland. So it's a panel which represents the whole of the UK there. So it certainly has a degree of authority, and it's not a matter of, for example, as canvassing Welsh Government to come up with a solution. Obviously, when matters relating to Wales are discussed in the panel, then presumably Welsh Government has a particular voice in the same way that you'd expect with Scotland or whatever. I'll stop there and take any comments or questions if anybody would like to raise issues or ask questions of me. I think Councillor Mitson, yes.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just ask a question? 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 Can I just ask
Yeah, thanks for that, Kim. Excuse me if I'm being naive, or touch naive anyway, but he said September 23, you know, there's the closure date probably for the Civic Centre. So that means we've got about roughly just under 3 years then to find premises for our archives. Sure. Isn't there anywhere we can sort of build a purpose-built building, you know, and I don't know if he tried funding or lottery funding. Has anybody sort of looked into this? I mean, I might be touching naive. I don't know how long we've been thinking about it. We've been a councillor for years, but I just sure there are some land somewhere where we can build a purpose-built one, isn't it? I don't know.
Well, we have been discussing it for a number of years, depending how long you've been on the committee. I think it goes probably. I'm trying to think the year in which Swansea Council first said we were going to dispose of the Civic Centre. I've got somewhere on my PC. I've got the front page. I remember the front page of the
2014.
Right. It was on the front page of the Evening Post, sort of
2015, yeah.
January sale, and it was a picture of Civic Centre, wasn't it? So we have been discussing it since then, and we did go into a partnership or a discussion group with Carmarthenshire and with Richard Burton Archives, Swansea University, about creating a joint facility, and that fell through. Partly, in the first instance, Carmarthenshire councillors all voted to say that Carmarthenshire Archives should remain in Carmarthenshire, and they built an extension to Carmarthen Library. I mean, having said that, they've been closed for 6, possibly 7 years now. So I think it's important to be aware that these things move very slowly. But they did ultimately invest the required capital to build an extension. And it seems to be a very fine building. It's not open yet, but in full. But the Carmarthen Library is refurbished, but the archives aren't yet open. But these things take a long time. But we went into a little bit of a cul-de-sac or blind alley, or whatever the right cliche would be, with regard to pursuing the joint solution, because the working group essentially sort of fell apart round about 3 years ago, I think, or something like that, 2 to 3 years ago.
Kevin, can I just ask you, we've got the provisional accreditation for a further 12 months. 12 months time, we'll go through the same process by you attending the panel and them having to be satisfied. So quite clearly, well, would it be right to say that some progress needs to be made by next year for the panel to see, well, yes, some progress has been made to grant us further provisional accreditation?
I think they would expect. Would expect a resolution in a year's time. I think the likelihood is, if we're no further down the line in 12 months' time than we are at the moment, that they would say, well, we gave you another 12 months to come up with a solution. You haven't come up with a solution. We can't continue indefinitely to give you provisional status. One of the things actually is that the accreditation only ever lasts for 6 years. So what happened was that we reached the mid-term of our 6-year accreditation. We failed to get through that. That was in 2019. Yes, 2019. So we were awarded accreditation in 2016 for 6 years till 2022. 2019, we had our mid-term review. We failed that review, and then we were moved to provisional status, and then we've had a second review. That means that of our second term, we've had 2 out of the 3 years of our second we're at midterm, so we're going to actually have to, in 2022 anyway, we'd have to start with a blank sheet of paper and apply all over again anyway. So yeah, I doubt whether we would get provisional status for a third year.
And if we lost the status, what's the impact of that? Well,
I think one of the things that bothers me is that we may not be eligible for external funding for a new building. So if we have, I'll put this in strong inverted commas, misbehaved, as it were, so much that we have lost accreditation, I don't think Heritage Lottery Fund, for example, would consider a proposal in that we haven't been exercising the due care and diligence to try to find a solution for the archives beyond, obviously we have, because we have had this working, we had the working group, we did start very early, and those were the reasons why we back in 2016, because they said at the time, we note that there are plans to vacate the Civic Centre. However, you have a partnership going, you're in regular communications and so on, but it's like we've gone back to square one a bit really since those days. So that's the reason that we went back to provisional status.
Okay, so the situation is becoming rather pressing. Peter, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, just a quick question. In terms of external funding, would we be eligible for funding for a conversion as opposed, or is it just new build?
I think those are discussions that we would have to have with external funders, really. So I think the first thing would be to come up with a plan that there are. I'm trying to think. Heritage Lottery Fund has funded 2 new archives in Wales in the last couple of years. Conwy, a very nice new archive. It's only just opened on the edge of the historic town. And then there is a application looking very promising for Denbighshire and Flintshire to go in mould next to Theatre Mould, which is also a new build. But I'm sure that they've also funded conversions. But has to be said that, for example, Carmarthenshire didn't get any external funding, nor did Glamorgan in Cardiff. I think one of the things about external funding is that it has to be more than just replacing like for like. There's got to be something exciting about to attract the attention of external funders. So if you look at the Denbighshire Flintshire one, which is looking very promising for HLF funding, it's next door to the theatre, quite a well-known theatre in North East Wales, and there are all sorts of synergies and things about developing something in the relatively small town of Mould, with being on the same site. And similarly, HLF were obviously captured by the idea. It was quite a nice new building on the outskirts of Conwy, which is a town of great historic built heritage value, and it's quite a low-level building that fits in well with the historic environment and so on. So it's got to have something that makes it appeal to external funders, really. So they wouldn't just, I think if we just went to external funders and said, well, we're vacating the Civic Centre and we need to just move into this, let's for the sake of argument, industrial unit in the Swansea Enterprise Park, I don't think they would be particularly inclined to say, that's an exciting development for archives. You're going to attract new users, new diverse audiences, or whatever. I think there are a couple of cases of archives in industrial units, Anglesey being one of them. They were forced out of their building when it developed substantial cracking in the building, and they had to vacate the structural problems, and they put the archives into a converted industrial unit. Well, they had to do that totally out of their own funds.
So if you were talking about improving accessibility, for example, making it more central, that might be one way to attract funding.
It may be, yes. I think it's probably would be related to attracting new audiences and providing facilities that extra facilities and so on. So yeah, I think funders are attracted by bright and shiny, and also new audiences and so on. So and in many cases, a new building is linked to outreach activity, new outreach activity, and so on. So it's got to be exciting to capture the imagination, really.
Chair, if I could just say that the report is scheduled for Cabinet in February, which is, I think it's been delayed now for almost 9 months due to COVID and other issues. So obviously, if it does come forward and it is an open report, I'll circulate it to members as you requested previously.
Yes, thank you, Gareth. That would be very helpful. I'm sure we'd all like to see that report. Thank you. If there's no other questions, Kim, do you want to carry on?
Well, I'll just wrap up, really. We're just saying we have had the accessions of archives that have been listed in the appendix there, and I'm very pleased that our former chief executive in Neath Talbot, Ken Sawyer's, deposited his records with the archives. It's very nice. I went to collect them from him in a socially distanced manner. He put them on the doorstep, and we stood at 2 meters distant, had a conversation, and I took them in my car back to the archive. So, but it's nice that we've got a picture of Neath Talbot's history from its inception as a unitary authority during the time that he was chief executive. So very pleased to take them, and indeed to chat to him on the doorstep. So yeah, it was very pleasant.
Yeah.
And they're now listed, I think, Andrew, aren't they? That's right.
They are, yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Kim. It's good to hear that Ken has been using his time wisely during lockdown and making your records more complete. Are there any other questions or observations, comments from anybody before I conclude? No. Well, Kim, thank you very much again for a very interesting meeting. I know you said at the very beginning it was rather a thin report. However,
we have run.
I think a couple of those items are really quite meaty and have really merited augmentation of the issues and that discussion that we've had. I'm sure I can speak for the whole of the committee to say that we are absolutely delighted that you have been able to open and that you've managed that process so well in keeping everybody safe, working within the guidelines, which must be really quite onerous in a way, but understandably so. So interesting to see the work of the archivists. I think, like, the Twitter campaign really reflects on the talent and the imagination of the staff within the archive service to do something differently and to extend the reach to so many other people through social media. It can be a bane of people's lives, but I certainly think for something like this, Twitter and Facebook is certainly a benefit. Yeah, understandable that the use of the service, it is going to change, and certainly the changes reflect what we've been going through. But I'm sure in due course we will come back to what is usual. But interesting to see how the online activity has increased. So that demonstrates the need and the value of the archives and how interested people are. Really exciting, the project around the slave trade and rebalancing that. delighted to hear that it is going to be a much broader project, and I think, you know, Swansea will be there, or rather West Glamorgan. I shouldn't say Swansea because it is West Glamorgan Archives. Apologies to Neath Talbot, but you know, we are flying the flag for this kind of thing, and I think it's testament to the quality of the staff that you have working for you. And I understand that David isn't too well, so please would you give him our very best wishes for a full recovery, and we do wish him well. I suppose perhaps relief is a word to describe the fact that we have been given or retained the provisional accreditation. It would have been really quite sad if we'd lost it this year, but quite clearly there is a lot of work to be done over the next 12 months, and let us hope that we are sitting here in 12 months' time looking at some good progress that's been made. And I think what you've said about the importance of buildings and talking about what is needed, how important it will be for informed people to be involved in those discussions around where the archives are going to be, because as we all know, they require such stringent conditions in order to preserve them and keep them intact. So I do hope that you or an appropriate person will be involved in the plans going forward. And, you know, right through the meeting, once again, we have heard how important archives is for legal, for pleasure, but also for people's rights as well. The two examples that you quoted, how important is it that members of the public can just access an archive and to be able to put their minds at rest and perhaps help them through problems that they experience. And, you know, right on our doorstep, just Ken's depository with regards to Neath Talbot Council, of course, you know, set up 25 years ago, was it now? And how important it is that we've got things like that. 25 years, it's gone, hasn't it? And no sooner it will be perhaps 100 years, and people will be looking back on those records to be able to develop some kind of historical story about how local government evolved and developed over the course of the century. So all in all, extremely interesting meeting, and all it remains for me is to thank you once again and your staff for what you've been doing over the last 3 months, and to wish you and your staff a very happy Christmas from all on the committee, and from myself to the committee, a very happy Christmas to you too.
Thank you. And you, Louise.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you very much.